Alright, so now that we have that, we're going to go through several inverse trig function problems to review, and then we'll do a small review at the end. We won't spend as much time on the law of sine. Most of the time we spend with the remaining 25 minutes is going to be on the inverse trig functions, because that's what we're weaker at. So let's get started. So you need a sheet of paper out if you don't have one already. And I'm going to put a problem up on the board. You need to work it. I'm going to walk around the room, see how we're doing, and then we'll put the answer on the board, make sure we're all on the same page. So, inverse sine of 1/2. Use that information we just wrote down to find inverse sine of 1/2. Where'd the negative come from? Because it's only negative if my number's negative. Alright, so we should have ended up with pi over 6. What we should have ended up with, we go to sine, I go till I see 1/2. My matching angle is pi over 6. We like it, and we're moving on. So try inverse cosine of negative 1/2. Inverse cosine of negative 1/2. What was that thing? Alright, we look for a match again. I go to cosine, I go across till I see 1/2, I go up, 1/2 gives me pi over 3. Now I need to remember, how do I handle a negative with inverse cosine?
One less than the denominator.
One less than the denominator, so my answer should be 2 pi over 3.
Now, if it was a negative, would you just have pi over 3?
If the negative wasn't there, my answer would have been pi over 3. Arctangent of negative square root of 3 over 3. Remember, square root of 3 over 3 is the same thing as square root of 3. These two are the same thing. So that means when I go to this and I see that, that's the same thing as that. So what I want is the pi over 6. Alright, radical 3 over 3 is the same thing as 1 over radical 3. So tangent 1 over radical 3 gives me the angle pi over 6. How do I handle a negative and inverse tangent? Make it negative. There it is.
So what'd you do with cosine? When it was negative, you just...
The top number needs to be 1 less than the bottom.
Is there a rule for sine?
What happens on sine?
Keep negative.
Keep the negative. Sine and tangent are the same. If the negative is on the inside, then my answer needs to be negative. Cosine's the one that's different. Alright, inverse sine of negative 1. Give me that one. Alright, on this one, I go to sine on my chart. I go across. There's no 1. So that means what?
It's on the graph.
I go to the graph. -1 is right here. That matches negative pi over 2, so my answer is negative pi over 2. Arc cosine of 0. Alright, so I go to my chart, I go to cosine, I go across, there's nothing with a 0, so that means I need to go to my graph. My 0 is right here, so my y value at 0 is
Pi over 2.
pi over 2, so my answer is pi over 2. So there are just the straight up evaluating inverse trig functions. Now let's look at the combinations. Alright, I want to evaluate tangent of inverse cosine of 1/2. Tangent of inverse cosine of 1/2.
Is this the one that has to do with the ASCC?
There's a possibility it could. On tangent pi over 3.
Just like that?
Alright, so I evaluate the inside piece first. So I find a match between cosine and 1/2. That gives me pi over 3. Then I need tangent in pi over 3. Since this is a regular trig function, what do I need?
Reference angle.
Reference angle and quadrant. So pi over 3. Tangent, pi over 3 gives me radical 3. And what's my quadrant?
Oh,
1. And everything in quadrant 1 is positive, so that's my answer.
It's 60 degrees. 360 degrees.
Cosine of inverse tangent of -1.
how would you?
Alright, evaluate the inside. So I go to tangent, I go to 1, I get pi over 4. Since it's inverse tangent and a negative, that needs to be negative. So now I'm evaluating a regular trig function, which means I need the reference angle and the quadrant. So I go to cosine, I go to pi over 4, gives me the 1 over radical 2. Now I need to decide what quadrant negative pi over 4 is in. It's in the fourth quadrant. What's my letter for the fourth quadrant?
C.
C. I'm dealing with cosine, so that means my answer stays positive. Cosine of arc sine of negative 1/2. Cosine of arc sine of negative 1/2.
Where you guys going?
Quiz on Monday. And I'm recording this, so if you want to go online and watch the rest of it, you can. Alright. Arc sine of negative 1/2. I go to sine, I go across to 1/2, that gives me pi over 6. Since it's an arc sine and a negative 1/2, that means that needs to be negative. So, regular trig function, reference angle, and quadrant. So cosine 1/2 gives me, cosine pi over 6 gives me radical 3 over 2. What quadrant is negative pi over 6 in? 4, and my letter for 4 is C, so my answer stays positive. One more of those. Alright, cosine of sine of arc cosine of negative radical 3 over 2. Sine of arc cosine of negative radical 3 over 2. Alright, inside part first. I've got cosine radical 3 over 2 gives me pi over 6. What do I do with negatives and arc cosine?
One less than
One less. So now I'm doing sine of pi over 6. So that means I want sine of pi over 6 to begin with. So sine of pi over 6 gives me the 1/2. And then I need the quadrant. So what quadrant does pi over 6 end up in? 2. My letter for quadrant 2 is S. So what happens to my answer?
positive.
Stays positive. Very good.
So you just don't deal with the 5?
I do with the 5. The 5 tells me what quadrant it's in.
But I didn't.
Oh, okay.
So you can just know that this is in quadrant 2. How do I know this is in quadrant 2? Because this number is 1 less than the bottom. Anytime this number is 1 less than the bottom, you know you're in quadrant 2. Or we know pi over 6 is how much? 30, and 30 times 5 gives me 150. Either way, that tells you you're in quadrant 2. Whoops. How did that happen? Alright, now we'll switch it up just a little bit. Inverse cosine of sine of pi over 6. All right, I've got a regular trig function on the inside, so I need my reference angle and the quadrant. So I go to sine, I go to pi over 6, which gives me 1/2. What quadrant is pi over 6 in?
It's in the first.
First quadrant, so we know it's going to stay positive. So now I'm looking for inverse cosine of 1/2. I go to cosine, there's 1/2, which gives me pi over 3. Next one. Inverse tangent of cosine pi over 2. Inverse tangent of cosine pi over 2. Alright, cosine pi over 2. I go to my chart. There's no pi over 2, so that tells me to do what?
Look at the graph.
I go to the graph. So I go to cosine. Here's pi over 2. What matches up with pi over 2?
0.
0. So now I want inverse tangent of 0. So I go tangent on my table. There's no 0, so then what do?
Go to the graph.
Go to the graph. 0 is right there, so we end up with
0.
0.
But isn't the graph of cosine and the inverse of cosine?
It is. So you can just do it
Oh
opposite.
man, it does look like it's down.
Just think you're looking for a y value and then the x value.
I'm doing math and about to get donuts and then you're really
Alright. Here's the one that gets everybody. See what you do about it. Inverse sine of cosine of 0.
Wait, no.
And everybody is making the same mistake so far. You're making the same mistake everybody else is.
Am I?
As are you. Everybody's doing the exact same thing. How'd you jump to there?
I don't know. Because I was thinking about
Is
that.
that the right answer?
So you got the right answer.
Nice.
What?
You got the right answer.
Oh my god!
You guys did.
You got it right.
Yuck.
The one.
He told me I was doing it wrong. And I got the right answer.
You got the right answer, but you did it wrong.
Hey.
Well, I got
So how did you jump to there? I said I would.
A lot of people are getting the right answer but doing it wrong. Alright, so cosine of 0. Not on my chart. And a lot of you are going in here and doing this to me. No. What is 0?
An angle.
It's an angle. So I should be getting what out? If I'm putting an angle in, what should I be getting out? A number. And you guys are putting an angle in and getting an angle out, which is no good. So you guys are looking at 0 right here when you should be looking at 0 right there. Because we're talking about this is an angle, this is an angle. When you're looking at the inverse function, the angles are on the y-axis. So I need the angle of 0. The angle of 0 is down here. So what goes with 0 down there? 1 does. So 1 needs to be in here. Then I go up here to my chart. There's not a 1, so I go to my graph. Here's 1. There's pi over 2. I think. So we get pi over 2.
So it's
I think some of you put 1, and I said you were right, but you're wrong. Pi over 2 is what we're ended up in. So it's really not tricky unless that's 0. Whenever that's 0, it gets tricky. You got to make sure, what am I looking at? Am I looking at an angle or am I looking at a number? Okay, so don't forget that. All right, we need to get 2 more in real quick before we get out of here. So I'm going to put both of them on the board, and then we'll cover both of them. So work both of them, and then we'll come back and answer both.
7/2?
Yes. So cosine of inverse tangent of 7/2 and cosine of inverse tangent of 4/x.
We did it.
Alright, remember these are the 2 that you got to do what with?
Triangle.
You got to draw the triangle. We've got to do 7 and 2. This is the square root of 53, and then we get cosine, which is 2 over the square root of 53. Same thing on the other one, except you've got an x in there instead of a number. Alright, quiz on inverse trig functions and law of sines on Monday.